Hello, everyone. This is Sarah Holt. I'm the Artistic Director of RS Theatrics, and welcome to While the Ghostlight Burns. If you are not familiar with RS Theatrics, we are a small professional theater in St. Louis. We are in residence at the Kranzberg Arts Foundation, and our mission is to produce shows that have never been professionally produced in the St. Louis area, with the goal of adding new voices and new perspectives to important conversations in our community. Obviously, 2020 means that we've had to adapt a little bit. We're not able to produce our work live right now. And actually, we were already talking about, before any of 2020 happened, ways to bring our audience into more of an ongoing conversation with us, since we only produce 2 or 3 shows a year. So this effort is part of that. While the Ghostlight Burns will not only occupy us while we are in these pandemic times, but we hope to have it be an ongoing thing that continues the conversation when we're not on stage. We're going to be talking to St. Louis theater producers and other artists. And if you would like to help us in continuing this work and bringing us back to stage in 2020, or 2021, this has been an extraordinarily difficult time for lots of arts organizations, as I'm sure you're not surprised to learn. And if you are so inclined, you can help us greatly by donating to RS Theatrics today. You will see a donate link on your broadcast on Facebook, just double checking that it's happening. And if you are watching on our website, then you will be able to click up above where it says Support RS Theatrics. We do have an anonymous donor who has offered $700 matching donation. So everything you donate right now will be effectively doubled. Tonight, I am really happy that we get to talk to playwright, lyricist, and composer Shualee Cook. So bear with me, switch screens. Shualee writes theater as a way of asking questions and figuring out what she thinks of the world's proposed answers. She's the winner of the 2019 Parity Commission and has been a resident playwright at the Confluence Regional Writers Project, Tesseract Theatre in St. Louis, is one of our sister companies at the Kranzberg Arts Foundation, and Stage Left Theatre in Chicago. Productions, readings, and workshops include PARLORATORIO at the New Colony, EARWORM at Tesseract Theatre and Campfire Theatre Festival, CERCLE HERMAPHRODITOS at Stage Left Theatre Summer Reading and Queer Village Reading Series, An Invitation Out at Mustard Seed Theatre here in St. Louis, and Quantum Dragon Theatre and Benchmark Theatre Fever Dream Festival, Sunset Artists of the American West at 2016 Chicago New Work Festival and About Face Theatre, Tempest in a Teapot right here at RS Theatrics and 2016 Idle Muse Athena Festival, and The Geography of Nowhere, again at Mustard Seed Theatre. She's been a finalist for the 2019 O'Neill National Playwrights Conference, 2016 Jane Chambers Award, the 2016 David Calicchio Award, and a 2-time finalist for the Goodman Theatre Playwrights Unit. Please join me to the raucous round of applause from wherever you're watching for Shualee Cook.
Hello.
Hi, Shualee.
How's it going, Sarah?
Oh, not too badly. You know, all things considered.
Not doing too badly either, and with the same caveats and addendums.
So, something I'm just starting every conversation with, I'd like to know a little bit about what it looks like for you to be a playwright. What is your process? What does doing the work look like? And that could include normal times and right now. If
yeah, normal times is usually a succession of writing in coffee shops, but right now that is not nearly as possible. So I've been and I'm excited that there's still like a little bit of nice weather, shockingly, in November. Because over the summer, I kind of adopted Tower Grove Park as like my big place that I go to write. That is not my house. So I try to get a couple hours out there a day usually, but I've been being very bad at that lately. But yeah, so I guess for the most part, it looks like sitting down to somewhere to write, and then for a few hours every day, and then more writings of cover letters and artist statements specifically designed for specific companies than you could possibly imagine. Lots of trolling the internet for the latest places that are taking unsolicited submissions, being on a couple different playwright mailing lists that regularly update. So, and that's the thing that I feel like people don't tend to tell you as much. It's like, oh yes, I get up and I write and I do these things, but then there's the hours and hours and hours of submitting for things and touching base with the companies that you've worked with before when you have new things, and that ends up taking up probably just as much, if not more time than the more glamorous sitting down and writing of the script.
Yeah.
And also in non-COVID times, it definitely involves travel and exciting table reads and things like that. But for the last 7 months now, the little that I've been doing with that has had to be done over Zoom, and for the most part, like it does the job. But I definitely miss the little bits of relationship that happen in the margins, in those 5-minute breaks where you're standing in line for the one single occupant bathroom in the old practice space. So yeah, that's the thing that doesn't quite translate as well, and that I am missing and like cannot wait to have again. But yeah, so that's sort of a picture of my day. Lots and lots of emails, lots and lots of
while you've mostly been based in St. Louis, recently you've done some stints in Chicago as well.
Yes, yeah. My partner's up there for grad school right now, and so I've kind of been running back and forth between cities a good deal.
But your productions have been, while you have had productions in both of those cities, it's
yes,
not limited to that in any way. I'm not sure specifically where the theaters I just mentioned are.
Yeah, I've had readings in the Fever Dream Festival was in Denver, Colorado. That was a wonderful trip. Quantum Dragon Theater was in San Francisco. And I've been working really closely with Parity Productions. I was their 29 Parity Commission winner, which they award 2 commissions every year for female identified and trans and non-binary playwrights to support their work. And so I've been working with them in New York a good deal the last couple of years.
So I've gotten the idea that if you want to dedicate a significant portion of your career to being a playwright who gets your work produced, you're probably not going to be doing it in one city unless you are someone who has their own company and just
Yeah. There are folks like I know Jonathan Christensen in Canada like has his own troupe that just specifically does his work, and sometimes when they land on something really great, they'll travel. Some of their plays have ended up in New York, but that's a pretty Pigpen Theater Company does that too. So there are some folks that get along that way, but it's a bit few and far between.
We have a few companies in St. Louis that are primarily playwright or creator driven, like JPEK, Creative Works, but for the most part, unless you're interested in being a producer, you pretty much have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely I self-produced a show for the very first St. Louis Fringe. And that one experience told me that I did not want to do that ever again. It was a wonderful production, and I was so happy that it happened, but it was I was biting off a lot more than I could chew, and definitely felt it.
So you don't just write plays, but it is your primary focus is the theater world in terms of your writing. So how do you think playwriting in particular helps explore some of these topics that you mentioned in your bio that you're asking questions about and looking for answers, as opposed to other forms of writing?
Wow, that's actually a super big question. I feel like there are a lot of answers. I feel like the things that jump out at me is the theater has so many limitations to it, but those limitations are actually freeing in a lot of ways. When it comes to film, like there's a lot of elasticity of where the action can be, how many people, how many characters you can write into things, how many locations, and in a novel, like all you need is some sort of writing implement and paper, and and the opportunities are endless. With theater, because there are both spatial limitations as well as budget limitations, that often comes into play of how many characters you can have means how many actors you can hire. One of the things that happens is theater has an opportunity, because it tends to happen in the stories tend to unfold in specific spaces, that I think you have a form that is much more conducive to characters having personal conflict and being in conversation. There's a dialectic nature to theater that is a lot harder to justify in film when, yes, you can film 4 people in an art, in a living room talking about politics, or you can film, the White House getting raided by evil bad guys. And I think because spectacle is a little bit harder to pull off and a lot more expensive to pull off, theater has become a place for conversations. And also because it's a place where you are in the same room, and you are feeling your body's responses to being in a room with people having emotions, which is just not really something that other mediums get, is that idea that there are things happening on stage that your body in that space is having a specific reaction to, that I think, and that you are seeing these people as real people, not as light on a screen, but as actual bodies in your space. And I think when that happens, we become a little bit more open to acknowledging that person's humanity in a way that flat images or descriptions in books can really portrayed just through the way that our brains are hardwired.
I'm thinking of the film version of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which in many ways is very, very good, but
Yes.
It seems like in the middle, the filmmakers got bored with the living room. They had to take the show on the road,
Yeah.
which is something that never happens on the stage production if you're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because our brains are clever, but maybe not quite clever enough to not experience that discomfort when people are in the room with us as real. And that's a really powerful thing to play with. Yeah.
And I think that feeling of confinement might be the wrong word, but knowing that you're in this specific space can work for you in theater in a way it can't really in film.
Mm-hmm.
In film, there's always the tension of the possibility that anything could happen at any time. Whereas in theater, when you're looking at a unit set that obviously is not going to be moving around very much, it sets a different expectation for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, I think, allows us playwrights the opportunity to engage the audience in something more than excitement or spectacle, which I think is really important in this day and age when, especially now in the middle of the pandemic, when so much of our conversation happens on screens and happens in putting words into little boxes. It can be so easy to lose sight of the humanity of the person on the other side of that screen. And that's one of the things that I'm really excited for theater to address once this, knock on wood, is over, is to get us back in rooms and realize that a lot of the people that we have been seeing as monstrous are still people. It can be so easy to lose track of that when you don't have eye contact, when you don't see the beads of sweat on a person's face or the way that their hands are tensing up. Like, there are just so many cues to each other that we're missing, and I really look forward to having those again.
We were talking a little bit about the limitations before we started the broadcast of the theater that's been converted to Zoom, and there's some legitimately cool stuff going on.
Oh yeah, and a lot of great opportunities to do new things.
And there's some things that I think will continue after we're back in physical spaces, just because people have discovered new tools. But while there are a lot of technological limitations, there's also I've heard from some producers that they're thinking it's a play reading. All in normal times, I would just have the actors all sitting at a table. Now I just have them all on a Zoom screen. But they're finding that it doesn't translate as well to the audience, that the audience is more apt to get confused about who's talking to who. Or there's all sorts of things we don't think about because transferring a table read to Zoom seems like a no-brainer, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah, sometimes it's not. Well, especially since, like, at least when I've been doing it, so much of who you're seeing on screen where is kind of random and not uniform. And so if you as an actor are trying, even in a reading, you can make eye contact with the person that you are talking to in the scene. You can't really do that. And that lack of connection can be pretty palpable.
We've all been in that Zoom where we lose someone.
Yes.
So changing course a bit, what do you think the state of affairs right now is for playwrights who are not cisgender white men? We've heard a lot about how that is still the predominant demographic that is getting shows produced, particularly in very prominent settings.
Yes.
But are things changing? Are we seeing progress?
I think so. I think it's one of those things of theater can be such a slow industry, just insofar as you have companies planning seasons, oftentimes years in advance. So it can take a while to get there. I think personally, I've seen and have benefited from places like Parity Productions in New York, which their specific mission is achieving gender parity in theater. And so I feel like we are starting to see more organizations that are looking to plug the gap, and that has brought more opportunity to me personally. But I think I've been getting a lot of readings and some theaters that have optioned my work. But I feel like it's still I'm still getting opportunities from places that are specifically like, we're going to do this, rather than getting a whole lot of attention from many of the larger institutions in, say, New York or Chicago, where a lot of reputations are made. I'm still sort of flying under the radar in a way that's fun, and has its own opportunities. But I do think that a lot of marginalized folks are seeing more opportunities with scrappy initiatives really doing their best to promote work, but it's still really hard to get into those sort of towering institutions. It's just harder to break in.
On the national level, do you think what is the proportion of readings versus full productions going on? Is it different than it is in St. Louis? Because I feel like we don't have a huge culture of play readings that are marketed towards general audiences.
Yeah, we don't, but that's definitely a very different story, especially looking at my career as a playwright. I've actually only had 3 productions. Everything else has been readings or workshops. And interestingly enough, 2 of those 3 those 3 productions were in St. Louis. And the one outside of St. Louis was after that play had already been performed here. And so I personally see a whole lot of theaters, and part of it is because right now, like you said, with the limitations of Zoom, readings are about what you can do. But even before that, I feel like I've had a lot of my work read, and I do worry that the culture of theater development is going to be a place where theaters can show a certain amount of support for more marginalized identities without necessarily having to commit that much money to it. Mm-hmm. It can be a bit of a cheap fix if those theaters aren't really committed to actually taking that work into fruition. And I do see a lot of theater development that sort of trails off and doesn't necessarily go anywhere. So those are things that are creating more opportunities and are allowing playwrights like myself to build resumes and to get more experience and meet more actors and directors, which is always a great thing. But it can feel a little bit like a blind alley sometimes.
So you mentioned that there's these initiatives that are aimed towards specific demographics of playwriters and playwrights and other creators. Do you see that paired with, so both of us are also in the book world.
Yes.
This campaign of that's been going on recently of own voices. The idea that you want stories that are told about people with marginalized identities to be written by people who share those marginalized identities. Not exclusively, but that it's important to make sure that those voices are represented and that a certain type of story is coming from someone who speaks with some sort of authority from personal experience.
Yes.
Do we see that happening in the playwriting world as well, or is it more just focused on who is getting opportunities rather than what kind of stories they're telling?
I feel like I've kind of seen a little bit of a shift, and that may just be me. But I do feel like more people are in theater are becoming aware through various communities being really loud about when they get it wrong, are starting to look for people telling authentic stories. And one of the things that I hope for, insofar as that goes, is I feel like for a long time, theaters tend to do plays about marginalized people that are plays about their marginalization. And I feel like one of the things that's really important about having, in my case, trans people writing plays about trans people is, yes, it's important to tell the story of our marginalization and how that feels to be a trans person in the world. But sometimes even more than that, I want to see works where there is a trans person on stage and the play is not about them being a trans person. And I think both of those stories are really important. And unfortunately, especially when you have plays about folks on the margins being written by people who, for whom that is not their identity and their truth, you end up with a lot of the former. You end up with a lot of, here is the issue of transness, or one of the things that I feel like I see a lot from cis playwrights is, here is a play with 4 cis people who find out that someone they know is trans, and now they have to figure out what to do with them, you know? And so one of my hopes, and one of the things I look for when theaters say that they're committed to diversity and to telling stories that haven't been heard, is, are we just getting the Lifetime version of that story and that experience, or are we getting plays that are just lovely plays, where people in those positions can experience joy and love and struggle that is not necessarily connected to who they are. Yeah.
I feel like with a lot of in the trans community in particular, there's this attitude of like, well, there's barely any representation anyway, so anything is great, right?
Yeah.
Anything is not always great.
No, not really.
So speaking of portraying these identities on stage, how do you think we need to navigate the line between the intent that the playwright has for how something is produced versus the artistic freedom that the producer, the director, etc. has. I'm thinking particularly when we're looking at casting issues, but just in general presentation as well.
Yeah, that's a big topic. I feel like how do I want to put this? I feel like there are as I guess my question that I would ask, and let me know if this feels like it's getting too off topic or into another area, but I feel like the question I would ask is, why are you choosing my play? And who are you choosing my play for? And it kind of gets to some of the things that you were talking with Adam Flores about last week, has your theater committed itself to the community that this play is about? Or at least to people that this play encompasses? Or are you viewing this as a way to enable a community that you've already built? Are you viewing this as a learning experience for your community that has maybe not dealt with these people before? That's, I think, a very important thing to know as a producer, because it means different things for how that play is going to come about. And I did have an interesting experience in a few years back. A theater wanted to do my play Sunset Artists of the American West. It's a play that I wrote inspired by some experiences, the very few experiences that I had with one of my grandmothers, who was Choctaw, but who essentially chose to pass as white. And so very little of that culture got passed down to first my father, and then my brother and myself. And the producers saw this play and loved what it was talking about and really wanted to produce it, and brought in a director who was really excited about it. And so they chose it for their festival, and then went out looking for people in the Indigenous community around that city to connect with, and in many ways, like, tried all the right things, but it ended up just being a little too late. That the timeline that they had arranged for that reading was not a timeline that allowed us to connect with that community. And it was definitely a learning experience for me. And ever since, whenever I have gotten questions about that play, it's like, okay, who do you have ready to go for this? Have you already done the work? And is this play a way of cementing relationships that you have already started? Because I feel like that's a thing that I feel like producers and directors need to start thinking about, is what communities are we really actually going to invest our time in? And then what plays will help us continue that relationship and not start it?
And so I think what I'm hearing, which I would completely agree with, is that it is probably, if you're going to respect nothing else the playwright did, you need to cast the parts accurate to who the people are.
Yes. And that's a thing that that earlier in my career, I think I was more flexible with, but that it's so funny that that 2011 sounds like so far in the past now, but it kind of does. And
gone so far in the past.
and and our society, our culture is constantly changing and growing, and I know especially for the trans community, like there is a level of visibility right now that we've never had before, and that brings both good and ill with it in certain ways, but there are just more things that are possible now when it comes to, like you said, enabling people to tell their own stories. And it kind of goes back to your first question, actually, which is, well, I guess your second question, which is how can theater tackle some of these issues better than, say, films or novels? And I think one of the ways that it can, that it does not always, but that it can, is by the fact of how collaborative it is, and how collaborative it can be. I have a play called CERCLE HERMAPHRODITOS, which is all about a real life trans community in 1895 New York. And one of the things that was really important for me to have the 5 different trans characters in that play be trans people is that I am a trans woman, but I have my own experience, and no group is a monolith. And to think that I speak for all trans women and that my perspective on what being trans is somehow entirely universal, I think is a faulty idea. And in order for that play to be the beautiful communal thing that I wanted it to be, I needed other trans people in that room with me to tell me what they were comfortable with, to tell me what they felt about how I was representing us. And without that, it would have been a much more difficult thing. And I don't think that it would have been as complex and nuanced as it ultimately ended up being.
And I think we touched a lot last week and a little bit here about the importance of building those relationships and that trust between communities, and making sure that you're doing that outreach in a really holistic fashion before you want to go after specific asks from the community, like giving an actor to play this part. And I think before about how with the communities that are not just underrepresented, but are particularly marginalized right now, because while there are lots of people who are not getting a proportionate representation, the trans community in particular has been so targeted in recent time.
Yes, yeah.
There is a real risk that goes along with some of these asks, that if you were asking someone from that community to enter a space where they don't know people, enter that rehearsal room where they're trusting their experience to people that if you're asking them to trust people they're not familiar with, and then to get up on stage in public and basically proclaim that marginalized identity, there has to be so much more groundwork done to make sure that the community is well supported by your organization.
Yes, absolutely. And that there's been some trust built there too. I think that's really important. And that's a thing that sometimes gets overlooked too, is it can be difficult writing plays with characters that in many ways we often see stereotypes or misrepresentations. because at least myself as a playwright, I don't want to have to write that play where every single trans person in it is an angel, where everyone is good and unselfish and does everything that that we expect good people to do. That isn't very often doesn't end up being very interesting. And so in order for me to write real characters, there definitely does have to be a trust that that the directors, the producers, the theater institution itself is going to take what I say seriously and is going to protect these people in this room who are being vulnerable with themselves in a space where traditionally a lot of times that doesn't always work out very well.
And I think also, and this is not my experience, so tell me if I'm off base here, but it seems to me that with the trans community, we're also often asking for an extra level of vulnerability because so many of the roles for trans people involve portraying in some way a pre-transition version of the character or a closeted version of the character, which is a big ask if someone is out in their everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. In that play in particular, I wrestled a lot just because dealing with the era in which it takes place in, where being on the street in clothes that other people consider for the other gender, like, was a crime, actually punishable by 2 years hard labor in New York. I wrestled a lot with, like, do we have these actors come in the door of this apartment where this play takes place in the clothes that they would be wearing on the street? I agonized over that a lot. Ultimately couldn't find a way around it, but and because of that, I have been very protective of the casts that have read it, and will be protective of the cast that eventually performs it, because it's a huge, like you said, it's a very vulnerable place to be as a member of a community that can often be represented in the public imagination as an imposter, as a fake, as someone putting on another identity that isn't theirs. So yeah, there are just, yeah, it's fraught. It's very, it's very fraught. And it was really funny because the first table read that we did of that play, at the very end, literally, like, we finish, the stage manager reads the words "end of play," and one of the actors slams their hand down on the table and it's like, "I can't believe nobody died."
Spoiler alert.
Ruined it all now. But yeah, and I do hope that, and not even just for the trans community, but especially for us, that when people put on plays, I really hope that they think about how comfortable an actor is going to need to be in this room in order to really tell the story, because that can be a major factor, as we've been hearing for, I think, the last several months. A lot of people of color, trans folks, all around multiple spectrums, have started to be very vocal about the rooms that they felt safe in and the rooms that they did not feel safe in. And I think that's a very good start. But we have a lot further to go.
I do just want to backtrack a little bit. Can you give just the super capsule concept of CERCLE HERMAPHRODITOS? Because for people who don't know.
Yes. CERCLE HERMAPHRODITOS is a play that takes place in New York in 1895 about a young trans man named Ambrose who comes up with a plan to live as much as himself as possible by going to Roland Laureline Reeves's CERCLE HERMAPHRODITOS, which was a social club for what then would have been known as extreme type androgynes, but now that we now call trans women, in order to find a bride so that they can marry and Ambrose can live with this other person in private as husband and wife, and in public as husband and wife in the way that is expected of them. And it ends up being a little bit more fraught than he may have expected.
But no one dies. So you've done a lot of different new works development projects around different companies and different geographic areas. What do you wish we saw more of in that sphere?
Well, definitely what I had mentioned earlier, plays about underserved communities that aren't about the big issues that they face. I really do feel like we need more plays that are about us just being people rather than being a specific demographic. I also, so this is a little bit of a pet peeve for me personally because of how I write. I feel like more and more there is an urge in American theater that is often driven by economics to make plays smaller and smaller and leaner and more manageable, so that you start to see a lot of festivals, a lot of new play contests that are all, we want your wildest ideas for 4 people and it can be no longer than 80 minutes. And so I do hope for theaters to maybe take bigger risks, especially with playwrights from underserved communities, because I know a big thing that has been going on with CERCLE is I would keep taking it to places and a lot of the feedback was always the same. It's like, it needs to be shorter. It needs to be shorter. And it did. And I ended up, slicing 25 pages off of it. But every now and again, and it differed from place to place, but every now and again, I would start to wonder, it's like, are we still working to make this play better? Or are we just making it shorter now? And especially as someone for whom taking up space can be a fraught thing, it can often feel limiting if it's like, we really want to tell your story and we want to hear your voice within these very rigid economical confines. So I do hope that theaters think about that and maybe realize that some of the voices that have traditionally gone unheard in theater, we want a big stage. And we have seen so many hours, long hours of plays that did not connect to our particular experience, that maybe there's something really worthwhile and valuable in investing the resources and giving people of color and other marginalized identities not just a place in your schedule, but a big place and a big table.
And I would also argue that if you are asking someone to come to the first rehearsal with a fully edited script at the length that you want the production to be, you are not engaging in new play development. You are just shopping new scripts. So much of what, if you want something cut down, if you feel it's too long, sometimes you just have to hear it and see it and find where it's slowing down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's asking that to be done before you start putting it up is not always reasonable.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you set the expectation of in final performance it has to come in at this length, but the work doesn't necessarily have to happen solely on the playwright's computer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I know as a playwright, like I tend to be someone who overwrites, and then as I hear it, it starts to take shape, and I start to realize, oh, yeah, there's a thing called acting that this actor is doing and only needs 2 sentences to get that across instead of 7. Okay.
But basically, we need to start a 3-act play festival.
Please, someone start a 3-act play festival. I will have so many plays for you.
I'm going to throw out a couple more questions, but I just want to say, because I forgot at the beginning of this broadcast, that if anyone does have questions of their own, to go ahead and throw them in the comments on the Facebook broadcast, and we will receive those where we are. So whether you are a producer or an educator or just somebody looking for new audition material, where do you go to find the plays that aren't being recommended by the algorithm on Samuel French and Dramatists' websites?
I would say New Play Exchange. Absolutely. It's what, like $12 a year to get a reader account on there, I think. And pretty much every playwright I know has at least some of their work available to either inquire or just flat out read on New Play Exchange. That's where I feel like a lot of really great, really beautiful work is just sort of hiding, waiting for people to find it. And they have good search functions and keywords that you can look for. And you can just find a lot of really, really great stuff there.
I know I've taken the Kilroy list there recently, and the Kilroy list is basically a massive list of recommendations of new plays by female identifying playwrights. And you just type those plays in and add them to your read list, and that will be busy for months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I currently have, I think, 8 different plays on there that people can read and look at. So yeah, it's a newer resource that's kind of built up more and more in the last few years, and is really kind of changing the game in a lot of ways.
Definitely agree with that. So for anyone who is interested in playwriting, maybe they've started writing some plays, what do you recommend as the groundwork to making a career of that, particularly if there's someone who doesn't have the systemic advantages of, oh, I'm in a college system that funnels me into these developments?
Yeah. Because that definitely was not me. And I feel like I would say 2 things. I would say get out there and send out a lot of stuff absolutely everywhere that you possibly can. And most people you will hear back from will be no, but that's kind of, especially as you said, you know, I did not go to school for this. I went to school for theology. Went to a very conservative seminary, which was not super helpful. So yeah, I feel like never be afraid to send your stuff out, even if you know you're going to get a no. Just the act of putting it out there can be valuable in its own way. And then the other thing that I would say, other than tirelessly submitting everywhere you can, is really get to know your local theater community. And try to, as hard as you can, to get plugged into your local theater community. I feel like in so many ways I have a career because of Mustard Seed Theater. Because back in 2011, Emily Emmer was in charge of their very first new play festival that unfortunately also ended up being their very last new play festival. But two of my plays ended up in final consideration. One of them got a staged reading that apparently everyone on the committee voted for except Deanna Gent, who really liked the other one, and later on approached me and was like, what would you think about developing this one a little bit more? And that's the one that finally ended up on stage and was my first like full professional production in 2015. So I do feel like it's really important to know your own theater ecosystem and to forge relationships there, because so much of this business is about, well, where have you been produced elsewhere? A lot of people will see a script and maybe not even know how to react to it until they see your resume. I know I feel like I tend to write scripts that come across people's desks and looking at it is like, is this a novice or is this on purpose? And so finding those local connections and doing the often unglamorous work of forging community where you are, wherever that is really important, especially if you don't have that collegiate web of connections.
And I'll throw out that if you are a playwright who is not involved in other areas of theater art, and so you're wondering, well, how do I get involved if I'm not getting produced? Almost every theater company out there is in need of volunteer ushers, and that comes along with the show for free and meeting the people who are behind productions and forming all sorts of relationships. There are so many people I only know because I ushered for their company, even though I've been doing that since 2001. So
yep.
You're an usher. So we're getting close to the end of our hour. I do want to just do our shout outs here real quick. Once again, RS Theatrics is your producer for this live stream this evening, and we are very much accepting of donations right now. If you donate between now and next week's live stream, you are eligible for the Shualee Cook prize package, which because Tempest in a Teapot was the production that Shualee did with us. We've got our little it's not a teapot, it's a mug. And if you donate at least $20 between now and next Monday at 7 o'clock, you will be entered into that prize package and you will be participating in the donation match. And then, Shualee, I'm going to ask you to tell people about where they can find more information about what you have coming up.
Yes. On your screen right now, Oh, there we go. On your screen right now, there is the main page from my website, shualeecook.com, SHUALEECOOK. And you can find what I am up to and synopses of my plays, some sample works, things like that there. I'm also, as I mentioned, on New Play Exchange, which is a wonderful place to go looking for really neat scripts. And yeah, I will be having a reading of the play that we talked a lot about tonight, CERCLE HERMAPHRODITOS, with Parity Productions, online sometime in the near future. We're still working out a date, but keep your eyes peeled for that because it will be coming hopefully soon.
So I just dropped in the chat the link to Shualee's website, and now I am dropping New Play Exchange. Sorry, I didn't prep that one.
Yeah. It is a paid membership, but like I said, they're very small fees for a whole year, and it really is worth it.
Oh, and I'll throw out that that image you saw from Shualee's website was the Mustard Seed production of An Invitation Out.
I miss that play so much.
Thank you, Julie, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
We're, I'm sure, happy to continue this conversation in the comments. If people want to visit Facebook, I know we had some people say they were going to watch this later. So if you have anything to say, reach out, let us know. We're going to be back here next week with Darius Varner. We're going to talk about his work as a producer, writer, and director, addressing issues of mental health, particularly as it affects the Black community. And in 2 weeks, we'll be here with Erin Kelly talking about Native representation and her project using theater to educate people about Native issues. So find us here. That's this time next week and future Mondays. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.